The other week, I posted an image on social media. It's a summary of my main character on Warcraft logs showing what looks like high-ranking stats with the caption, "Be the best version of yourself." I am. It's one of my little inside jokes with a deeper message that no one's gonna get except for me and my guild and folks who are very familiar with me as a player, and you're about to learn it too. Anyway, it shouldn't come to any surprise that not a lot of people would be impressed by a record of my normal difficulty progression as a paladin tank's healing per second. After all, DPS is king, it's the meta, and doing anything else is just gross. I'm gonna cut straight to the main takeaway of this piece. The enjoyment of a video game is whatever you want it to be. People can judge, they do, and frankly, I don't need to defend the way that I tank, or I'm air quoting here, tank, but no one can take away our sense of joy. If we want to play off meta or way off meta, that's something that ought to be encouraged and nurtured and explored for, science. After all, this is just a video game, and fear not, I don't pug, and thus, you are in no danger of being grouped up with a heathen like me. Hey, it's Soul, and today I'm going to dive into my special non-meta build that lets me be a more effective off-healer as a paladin tank. And apparently, I'm one of the best players at it in the world. Yeah, I'm going to go over the philosophy, the class choice, spoiler alert, it's a paladin, the gear, and the talents. Hit that like button, subscribe for more coverage, catch me live on Twitch, and let's get into the mindset of what it is to put your focus onto healing as opposed to DPSing as a tank. The tanking role in general is pretty neat, because once you've more or less peaked at your regular role, you have two options. One is to deal more damage, and the other is to, well, in a way, take away the healer's job by taking considerably less damage, or in this case, to heal for him. Of the 6 tanking classes in World of Warcraft, Death Knights, Demon Hunters, Druids, Monks, Paladins, and Warriors, Druids and Paladins are the classes with abilities and talents that give some real oomph that assist allies, unlike the other classes whose vast majority of healing is just for themselves. But between Druids and Paladins, Paladins have the edge. They have stronger active support and control that lets the user excel at the role of off-healing. The role itself is advanced, and it needs enough experience in an encounter or dungeon that lets you slide your attention pretty evenly, and then use your spare GCDs on keeping the team healthy, including, of course, yourself. And like any healer role, the goal isn't necessarily to keep everyone's health topped off, but to prevent people from dying. Tanks already do that, off-healing tanks do a little bit more. The strengths of the off-healing tank include, I guess, the fun and challenge of altering your role. Their focus comes with powerful emergency heals that can be fired off, sometimes in quick succession, turning a bleak moment into a clutch save. They also provide moderately good party and raid-wide healing throughout an encounter without sacrificing too much of their own mitigation, allowing healers to shift their mana away from constant and predictable damage and more towards triage. In the right situation, this also opens up opportunities to complement an undergeared healer, even drop a healer from the raid team, or complete keys without a healer at all, although in any case, the bulk of the group needs to also be pretty exceptionally geared and skilled to not take excessive incoming damage. The weaknesses of an off-healing paladin include some obvious trade-offs. You deal way less damage than similarly geared tanks. In dungeons, you might need to double check your aggro on the pole to protect your big pumpers, but for the most part, a paladin threat it's pretty easy to maintain. Like other healers, you have a limited mana pool, so you can't just heal forever, and you need to save enough mana to heal yourself too, of course. But you're also not a true healer who has powerful raid-wide heals or magic dispels which are needed in certain encounters. And walking down this path simply is not popular. It's not going to be popular. I mean, yeah, you'll see some no-healer comps and keys, but that's few and far between. Not everyone is going to buy into your meme spec and would rather rely on a traditional healer. This isn't something you want to do with just any old pickup group, so it's very much an uphill climb to play this role, let alone have an opportunity to practice and master it. Alright, let's talk up some of the critical talents that make this build work. There's a little bit of legroom that you have based on if you're trying to assist with crowd control and or strong support abilities like Blessing of Sacrifice and Blessing of Protection. Some talents work better than others for Mythic Plus, but let's start with the class side, which offers what I call the soft heals. Lightforge Blessing is a must-have for making sure that if you're using Shield of the Righteous as a spender, it's also providing a modest heal for you and nearby allies. It's one of many pieces that make it so regular healers don't need to pay that much attention to you outside of the biggest tank busters or tank debuffs. Crusader's Reprieve is another bit of passive, small healing, but it adds up. A few more talents for sustained healing include Golden Path and Seal of Mercy. This is as much healing for allies as it is for yourself, since you're always standing in consecration, and it works great with the current tier set bonus, although next season might be a different story. Judgment of Light is also a very reliable passive as long as you're at least throwing hammers at your target, and you most definitely are. I found Seal of Might to be a better use of points than, say, Strength of Conviction, which makes Word of Glory stronger, but at too big of an expense in overall stats. As we approach the bottom capstones, there are some choices to make. Divine Toll is situational, depending on the encounter. It's least valuable in a pure single target situation because the Holy Power generation and mitigation, it's very low, but it's a must for keys, and you'll want to take the lower capstone for either more Avenger Shield interrupts or the lower cooldown. Meanwhile, Seal of Order is also a must-have for your Holy Power generation. It's much more effective than Fading Light, which only gives a small amount of mitigation for yourself. If the class side of the tree is passive heals, the spec side is where you focus on personal mitigation and cleave healing with Word of Glory, maintaining a minimum uptime on Shield of the Righteous. The cleave comes from Seal of Charity, which heals you for 50% of a Word of Glory cast as long as you're targeting someone who is not you. Hand of the Protector is also a natural choice to increase healing on other friendly targets, which again cleaves back onto you. So your behavior is going to change. If you're at critical health and you know you're in for a period of taking sustained damage, of course you want to take care of yourself first. But otherwise, if your mitigation can be maintained and you have Holy Power for it, use Word of Glory on a lower health target, and you'll receive half of the healing, which can easily be a few 100,000 HP. Keep in mind that the lower the target's health, the stronger the heal on both them and to you. Also help yourself out with Faith of the Light to increase your block chance a ton when using Word of Glory regardless of your target. This helps a lot against packs of mobs or heavy magic damage over time when taking on raid bosses. Avenging Wrath Might is also a powerful passive buff, and it happens to be my pick. 20% more crit applies to both your passive and your active heals. This build has a lot of flexibility for situations where you're taking excessive magic damage, or you're doing keys, you're doing single or multi-target. Just plug the extra points where you feel like they'll work best. Another situational talent to look at would be Bastion of Light, which is your best shot at contributing some burst healing during a big party or raid-wide damage event, but you'll need to plan for its use because it uses a big chunk of your mana pool. But after lots of goofing around, this build here on screen has been my go-to for maximizing heals to myself and to others, while still having most of the usual control that I have as a paladin and a few points to spare depending on the situation. My healers can mostly ignore me outside of certain windows, which is when I can call for some assistance. Guardian Druid passive heals are amazing and they really deserve credit, but Paladins have a bit more command over the battlefield and can easily snipe heals. I'll leave a few sample builds at the top of the comments for you to try out. Let's move on to gear, and by that I mostly mean trinkets. I'll first go over my research with some other pieces so you don't have to. The Flourishing Dream Helm is a crafted piece that does a very inconsistent amount of healing, with an unreliable primary proc and even less reliable secondary proc, as it buffs a target that you need to move close to in order to create a damage bubble. Now I'm willing to bet that if there was a raid full of plate wearers using this helmet, it would do some ridiculous healing, but I don't think I'll ever manage to make that happen. And while the Choker of Shielding is an okay option for your own mitigation, the cooldown is very long, and the whole point of this build is to help your allies. I also tried out the Undulating Spore Cloak, which was heavily nerfed before the season began, and sure enough, it still stings, but I use it anyway. Instead, you might be interested in the Magazine of Healing Darts, but as an embellishment, this is also pretty unreliable. It only procs off direct heals, meaning your Word of Glory or your Lay on Hands. And from the tooltip, the healing dart will target an ally, but if it happens to hit someone else, it's going to heal them instead, resulting in what's likely to be a lot of overhealing over time. In a way that actually makes this better in dire healing situations when the team is rarely ever at high health, but the lack of targeting makes this overall less effective than, say, Golden Path, which covers multiple nearby targets. The Ouroboreal Necklet is a highly situational piece, especially for a paladin who does at most Shadow Flame damage with certain items, but even then, as of this recording, it's broken. That's because despite what the tooltip says, the bubble will only proc when you deal nature or fire damage to yourself and not to others. So after chasing this item and finally getting it, I can say with good certainty, it's not worth it. The one enchant to recommend is Dreaming Devotion, which drops an AoE heal not unlike a Circle of Healing. It's not target capped either, and it procs fairly often. This adds to a lot of your passive healing, especially in fights where the group is fairly close together. So we're left with trinkets. Getting the best trinkets this season can be kind of tough because they both drop off Farok. The Tainted Rage Heart is simply too powerful of a standard tanking trinket to ever pass up on. It pretty much turns any tank buster into a noodle, making this the best in slot for increasing your own mitigation so healers can peel off and heal someone else who is not you. Your other challenge is to pick up the Blossom of Amirjasil, which is technically a healing trinket that works out pretty well for a paladin tank, using a bunch of passive heals like Judgment of Light and Golden Path, meaning that this will regularly be on cooldown. The effect will apply to a lower health target and heal them up for a bit, and then it either spreads to other targets or it continues healing the original target for a lot more. I only have the drop off the normal raid, which gives a hero class version. It's regularly very high up on my effective healing though, and man, if there was a whole raid of paladins using a few of these pieces, I wonder just how much passive healing would eventually go out. Anyway, again, the challenge is getting this particular trinket. In static groups, you'll basically have to beg your healers for this trinket during a farm night, or in Raid Finder, you'll want to roll main spec healing, or just hope that you get it from the Great Vault, which again, you need your loot spec to be set to healer. There are a few other trinkets worth farming this season. Zeratak's Unhatched Egg Sac drops off of Everbloom. It was a great trinket while I was using it, with a rare stamina stat, and the damage absorption procs a lot. It can easily surprise you and be your second on healing just below Word of Glory, making it great for any situation. The Leaf of the Ancient Protectors is another great on-use bubble. It's not nearly as good as the Farok trinket, but with the short 1-minute cooldown, it's not bad. This also drops off Everbloom, but this is a healing trinket. You'll need to have your loot spec set to heals in the hopes that it comes as a personal drop, or, hope that someone gives it to you. While your best trinkets are for personal protection or uncontrollable healing, they are going to be very big sources of throughput, so get the best quality trinkets you can get and upgrade them right away. One notable mention that I'll tuck back here is the Onyx Amulet from Season 1. Using this ring with all 3 healing stones generates some pretty impressive healing numbers for what's only an item level 424 ring. The ring was a cheat item in Season 1. It was only okay in Season 2, and it's not all that impressive in Season 3, but I use it in raids with some success. It just ain't what it used to be thanks to the passage of time and the extra item level increase this season. So you got some gear, you gotta build together, now what? As a paladin tank, you may already have a certain awareness of incoming damage to you and your team, and probably used more than a few heals to keep them up. That behavior isn't changing too much, but between your tanking and off healing, you're sort of, again, sliding back and forth. You're already going to do tons of passive healing from your regular rotation, and the Farok healing trinket is firing off whenever it feels like. Now all you're looking for is incoming damage while using the bare minimum effort to keep up your Shield of the Righteous buff. You'll need to rely on or improve your encounter knowledge, that way you'll know exactly when allies are going to get hit and you'll be able to toss a quick heal on them. Another thing you'll have to start caring about though is mana management, notably in raids. In queues, there's usually ample time between pulls to make sure you have a full mana pool most of the time, but you'll want to keep an eye out if you're running with 4 DPS or if you're chain pulling higher keys. You may also need help on Afflicted weeks, as Cleansing has the same mana cost as Word of Glory. Changes in Dragonflight stop prop paladins from having an infinite mana pool. A prop paladin can basically fire off 1 Word of Glory every 9 seconds without it being a net mana loss. Anecdotally, I've had encounters where my mana stays pretty high the entire time, and others where I don't even have enough juice to heal myself after like 2 or 3 minutes. Now, that mostly depends on the encounter type and the team's ability to avoid taking extra damage. So don't go crazy and try to pad meters if you can help it, although I tend to not follow my own advice. When starting this out, notably in raids, I find a good place to start would be to keep an eye on your healers, as their demise is the most impactful for you and your team. Your holy power spending will be between mitigation and healing, no surprise there, with most of the healing though going to other people, again, cleaving back onto you. Your responsiveness will have to be exceptionally fast, so healers don't waste mana or cast times on your intended target. The TLDR, you're a single target bomb healer with a bunch of passive healing, and you're getting punched in the face. I've been tanking this way for a good few years now, and I admit I don't play at the highest level. The gameplay style isn't necessarily made for the highest level either, but it is fun. It comes from those moments when someone's at the brink and I'm able to give them enough of that heal to keep them alive, or if it crits, they're nearly topped off, and that just feels super cool. If you made it all the way to the end here, I gotta say I'm both surprised and flattered at your interest at just checking this out. World of Warcraft and so much of gaming is full of meta chasing, and I thought it'd be cool to show you a playstyle that interests me that can still get the job done. A few example talent builds will be posted below, and feel free to come at me with questions or comments. Thanks for watching, and like this video, subscribe for more coverage, catch me live on Twitch, and I'll catch you later. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.